Hello everyone, this is Darion GNB here, and welcome to another and today we'll be taking a look at Chucky. With Season 3 of Chucky releasing over 2 years ago, and Mancini confirming the production on another movie, it seems like it'll be a good while before we have some more Chucky content to chew on. And it'll be quite interesting going into the foreseeable future, and not dedicate at least some kind of video centered around Chucky for a Spooktacular. So I'd like to end off this little era with taking a look at all 3 seasons of the Chucky TV show, and see how much of a fun and complicated mess it really is. Starting with Season 1. Season 1 of Chucky is about our titular doll after the events of Cult of Chucky, journeying to his hometown Hackensack, New Jersey, where he is taken in by a young Jake Wheeler, a middle schooler who lives with an abusive father, until Chucky decides to help him out in an attempt to make him his new killer apprentice. This first season is so much better than it has any damn right to be. The story and subsequent characters we follow throughout are pretty freaking fun. This show brings in a plethora of new faces to the franchise, as well as old for the die-hard fans. For the newbies, we have our main younger stars, Jake, Devin, Lexi, and Junior. Jake, our main protagonist, played greatly by Zachary Arthur, was a character that was really easy to sympathize with and get behind. With the story of his abusive dad, him being bullied at school, and his conflict with his sexuality, all topped with a pretty good performance from Zachary Arthur, does a great job at getting you attached to his character. Seeing him venture down a brief dark path, being manipulated by Chucky, and the lengths that he's pushed to was really freaking cool. Though it does go nowhere, that is something I want to complain about later on, but I really did like Jake as a character. Devin, on the other hand, not so much. FYI, get used to me saying stuff like that when it comes to Devin. Out of the younger cast, he was probably the weakest performance-wise, and one of the characters I cared least about. The line direction and line delivery for me was just kind of flat for him most of the time. It really felt like most of the time he just straight up wasn't there. Like he wasn't actually having these conversations with these characters. That's how flat it was to me. That also put a small detriment on one of the central plots of this season, that being Jake and Devin's relationship. Seeing them get together didn't feel as satisfying as it should have, because like I said, for the most part, it didn't even feel like Devin was all there, which didn't make their relationship feel that believable. Scenes like their kiss and that hallway scene are adorable in itself, but as a whole, it just wasn't executed as well to me, and unfortunately, Jake and Devin's relationship will continue to be one of the show's recurring issues, but I'll go further into that with the other seasons. Now, Lexi is played by Olivia Allen Lynn, who I think out of all the kid actors was probably the best. Which likely isn't a coincidence because while this season was initially airing, my friend reminded me that she was in another show that I had previously seen, that being Daybreakers on Netflix. I honest to God can't remember how her performance was in that show, but I'm willing to bet that experience helped because I thought she was great in this season, and she'll continue to be the standout of the younger actors as the show goes on. She was so good at playing the most despicable and grimy character who is not Chucky. My problems with her, though, is that her character arc and her starting out as a maniacal bitch, only to turn a new leaf and consider Jake and Devin her family, was so half-assed in my opinion. The biggest thing that makes this not work for me is that they did too good of a job at making you absolutely despise her. I get they wanted to do that to show Jake having that push and trying to kill her, but I feel like you could have done that without making her this downright cartoonishly evil. Junior as well was a character that was handled kind of flimsily in my opinion. He's not even really that prominent, he's mainly in the background for a majority of the show, until Chucky tries to move and make him his killer apprentice. Which is what I want to briefly discuss. Even though the remake came out first and did this, and it might be my bias towards the OG series, but I kind of like the idea of Chucky interacting with teens here. It's a clever take on the old formula of the first 2 films, and it's even more interesting with the idea of him wanting to recruit them as a killer apprentice. I already had a feeling they wouldn't commit to it with Jake, main character and all, but when he went around and manipulating Junior is when I started to get my hopes up and was eventually disappointed. See, not only did they do a poor job at making us buy that Junior can be a killer, they also threw in a pseudo-redemption for him right at the end that didn't really feel that earned, because he doesn't really show any reason to have that level of violence. And no, I don't think his mom dying or his dad being a piece of shit is enough justification. It just didn't feel natural, and yeah, his pseudo-redemption didn't feel all that earned, because, well, at least for me personally, we didn't see enough of him as a killer to really even get behind it. I feel the need to preface that I don't hate any of these characters. It's just that outside of Jake, I felt like the writing choices and general execution on them was just kinda iffy. Other than the youngins, we have a personal standout for me, being Devin Sawa, playing Logan and Lucas Wheeler. Jake's dad and Junior's dad. I felt he did a pretty good job for the one episode we saw of Jake's dad, and when we periodically saw him as Junior's dad. And I just love how much of a presence Devon Sawa himself has throughout the Chucky series. Bree, as well as Devon's mom, are kind of a problem that I'll go into in just a bit, but as a whole, these new characters were all pretty enjoyable for me. Now for our legacy characters. Nika, who last time we saw being possessed by the claw-handed Chucky and Cult, accompanying Tiffany. While we also have Andy Barkley, and making her grand return is Christine Elise as Kyle. So these guys were used pretty sparingly, and while I saw some others have an issue with this, I for the most part didn't mind. This story is mainly about the kids in Hackensack, but an issue I have is that it was only Andy and Kyle I felt got the worst treatment. Now, them being used sparingly wasn't an issue, but outside of that badass introduction where they shoot up the claw-handed Chucky, they didn't do literally anything until the finale. It also doesn't help that their performances weren't all that. Well, Christina Elise, for the little we got of her, I still felt did a good job at stepping back into the Kyle role. My biggest problem is with Andy. Considering we have more of him in this than Cult, I can say that in my opinion, Alex Vincent's performance as Andy was just really not good this season. He sounds so drab and emotionless for a majority of his time. And before anyone says that it was intentional because Andy has PTSD, I'm sorry, but if that is something he was intentionally going for, congrats, you succeeded in sounding boring as shit. It's especially apparent when there are lines like this.
He screams the loudest at fire. Those screams are my favorite.
That are meant to come off as dramatic or intense or whatever the hell they were going for, but comes across as more try-hard edge that just did not work for me personally. And Kyle, I felt, was handled with the most disrespect in this season, because not only is she barely used, her fate at the end of the season was just handled in such an unnecessarily strange way. Like it's left up in the air if Kyle is dead or not after the house explosion. Which leads to me talking about another thing, but we'll get into that later. Like, for proper context, in a scene where Andy and Kyle make it to Chucky's old home where Devon has been kidnapped, Tiffany, before leaving him there, planted a bomb at the front door. Andy went through the back and Kyle went through the front, unknowingly setting off the bomb. Devon made it out, somehow unscathed. Andy somehow made it out as well, but the story for some reason leaves it ambiguous if Kyle is even dead. Obviously, with the current hindsight of the following seasons being out, we know she does survive, but that doesn't make it any less weird that they made it so vague and mysterious in this season. Like the fucking shot of her gloved hand hiding behind the tree, like why the hell hide her if she's alive? Anyway, alongside Andy and Kyle, we have the return of Tiffany and Nika, the latter of which by far being the best performer in this entire season. And dare I say, the entire show. The shit Fiona Dorff is tasked to do in this shit would be damn near impossible to nail, but she does it almost perfectly. For context, after the events of Cult, the Chucky that possessed Nika is for some reason having trouble keeping himself conscious when in contact with blood. Yeah, I'll touch on that shit later. So it's kind of a back and forth on whoever is in the driver's seat, and it is so good. The biggest thing I have to commemorate Fiona for is the layer of performances she puts on. Like in some scenes she's playing Nika, but in others she's playing Chucky in Nika's body. Then there are instances where she's playing Nika, who's pretending to be Chucky, and in others she's playing Chucky, who's pretending to be Nika. When the show initially aired, the fate that Nika was left in at the end of the season had me a little mixed. But seeing what they do with it in the following seasons, I kind of opened up to it a bit more. But it doesn't change the fact that in this season in particular, her fate just seemed so unnecessarily cruel and mean. After dealing with the Chucky and Nika switching in and out, as well as Chucky trying to kill Tiffany, again, and her growing fond of Nika, she came up with a compromise to stop Chucky from getting in the way. And that compromise was to literally cut all of Nika's arms and legs off. On one hand, I admire and respect that they had the balls to go that crazy and that dark, but on the other hand, my girl hasn't known a moment of peace since she came into this franchise. And now you do this? Mancini, you really are one sick son of a bitch. Anyway, Tiffany is in full force this season, and I think she was pretty good. Yeah, in this season, I think she was pretty good. Except for the last two episodes where she's kind of just used for comedic relief, but as a whole, I really did enjoy her presence on the show. But there is something that did bother me. Now, again, a highlight in her story is her getting tired of Chucky's shit and breaking up with him. But this is probably the worst instance of this happening, because A, they've done this twice before, so now it's just starting to feel a little redundant. And B, even after she breaks things off with him, she still kind of tries to continue on with Chucky's evil plan, and even gets pissed when Andy seemingly foils it. So, yeah, kind of dumb. Tiffany, I overall enjoyed this season. Jennifer Tilly, as always, does a great job. Then we have the title character himself, Chucky. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think Chucky was absolutely perfect in this first season. Everything from the way he looks, the way he sounds, the way they showcase and present him as being a pretty big threat, but still not being afraid to slightly dip its toes into the more comedic side of things, really just made for a well-rounded Chucky experience for this season. And it's unfortunate that the following seasons really do not compare at all. I love that this show as well gave us the opportunity to get a deeper look into Chucky's past. When it was announced we'd be going through the origin of Chucky, I was intrigued but concerned. Mainly because I thought they'd go the generic bully victim turned psycho killer route. But no, it's just revealed that Charles was always just a fucked up little kid. And I like that it still leaves a bit of intrigue that doesn't need to be further explored. And I love going through his life history. Him as a teenager and him not that long before he actually possesses the doll. Weird tangent, but I love how the one part of Chucky's history they just choose not to go over is his relationship with Dika's mom. That is literally the one thing they skip over. And I think it's because they're aware that it was such a random and weird direction to take with Chucky's personality, and it just really doesn't line up with how he normally is. When I first watched the show, I thought this woman was Nika's mom, and that's how they tried to tie things in. Because the actresses look the same, but the woman in the clip looks very dead. And we know Chucky doesn't get her until Curse. So if that's not her, I just find it really funny how that's the one piece of Chucky lore they take. I find it funny how that's the one piece of Chucky lore that they just refuse to acknowledge. The flashback started to lose me a little after Tiffany was introduced, and it didn't help that the lip syncing with Jennifer Tilly's voiceover was a bit wonky.
Wow, it's never happened like that before.
Want to order a pizza?
I think that's a great idea.
Nag, 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 nag. Tip.
When was the last time that you took me out for a nice dinner and a murder?
But as a whole, this being a Chucky TV show, they did an amazing job with him. Okay, characters aside, this show offers a lot in terms of visual style. I love the direction, lighting, and color that is used throughout the show. It just looks really freaking good. The soundtrack as well was amazing. It definitely tops Bride as my favorite soundtrack in the series. The visual and practical effects as well were fantastic. The animatronic work on the doll is to me the best they've ever been. As well as the effects with all these kills being amazing. They ain't all perfect, but when they get good, they get really freaking good. This show as well has a pretty well-balanced tone. It has a healthy mix of the fun, wacky shit, as well as intense horror. But it also does a decent job with drama and character growth. For the most part. Yeah, something that I've been putting off for a sec is that, like Cult, there is just a lot of weird and unexplained shit that I can't really get off my mind. While I do think they have a good handle with small character drama like with Junior's mom, and character growth like Devin's mom, this show has a knack for having plotlines that go on for far too long, or some that just end up going nowhere. For example, Junior's mom, Bree, in the first episode, is seen having a sneaky little convo on the phone that one would believe is insinuating that she's having an affair. Cut to 3, maybe 4 episodes later, to where they just plainly reveal that it was cancer. And before we have any real time to digest or care about that info, Chucky just up and fucking kills her. If they introduced that element earlier instead of dragging it along for an unnecessary amount of time, we could have had more time to actually care, or at least flesh it out a bit more, but I guess not. Or with Devin's mom, where she starts to suspect Jake is behind all the Chucky killings, but she eventually comes around to trusting him through learning about Devin liking him. And before they do anything further with that, she's just freaking dead. Why? What was the point? Not only that, but there are also just generally a bunch of awkward moments in the show. Not really bad, just very weird. Like Chucky when he was about to kill Lexi, but then he just didn't for some reason. We never get a proper explanation on how Chucky and Nika keep switching back and forth. Like the getting knocked out part and regaining consciousness I kinda get, but they never explain why whenever they come in contact with blood, it triggers the switch up. And Chucky's apparent evil plan throughout the season was just kinda weirdly explained. It's just kinda randomly alluded to that he needed one of the kids to kill so that it can complete a voodoo spell to possess an army of Chuckies all at once. This is something that I cannot stand with certain shows nowadays, where they save all the important shit for the finale where it barely has any room to breathe. I feel like if this element of the story was introduced earlier, it would have given us a bit more drama and intensity to build up with the anticipation of if he gets a kid to kill, we're all pretty much fucked. Yeah, if it wasn't already apparent in this video, most of my gripes and complaints from this season comes from its very awkward finale. I mentioned in another video that I'm not typically a fan of when an ending to a story serves as a tease to a future installment, because the shit just feels incomplete as a result. Like with this finale, everything in it was just very poorly handled. The stuff with Andy and Kyle, the shit with Tiffany, the very strange movie theater massacre where Chucky's just rolling around and stabbing people in the ass and they just miraculously die for some reason. And yeah, just as a whole, really left this season feeling a little incomplete. Alright, so even though I've been fairly negative for a portion of this section, I still cannot recommend this season enough. Despite its flaws, Chucky Season 1 has a really good cast of characters, who all deliver decent to good performances, has a well-balanced tone that offers entertainment for those fond of the comedic and horror side of the franchise, all with a great soundtrack as well as amazing practical and visual effects. It all makes Chucky Season 1, in my opinion, a very worthy watch. With all that said, let us jump into Season 2 and witness how much of a definite improvement it is from the first.
2 hours later.
It is honestly very saddening how bad this season turned out to be. The second season of Chucky debuted in October 2022, and centers around our hack-and-sack trio through a mishap with our favorite murdering doll and an exploding child, wind up getting sent to a boarding school which just so happens to be the old stomping grounds of a young Charles Lee Ray. With the end of Season 1 establishing a horde of Chucky dolls, the three work to find out what mysterious plan Chucky has up his sleeve for them. So clearly if the transition didn't tip you off enough, I was not fond of this season of Chucky. Now I can't say I outright hated it, as there are quite a few things I came out liking and enjoying, but the overall dip in quality we had after the first season is extremely disheartening. The story throughout the season was almost completely non-existent. Very early on we're introduced to the format of the hack-and-sack kids needing to figure out Chucky's mysterious plan for them, which in my opinion was one of the biggest detriments for this season's story. I already had slight issues with the way they handled Chucky's evil plan in the first season, namely that it all gets brought up and executed within the last handful of episodes. But at least Season 1 built up to something. We spend unnecessarily long amounts of time dedicated to the kids going through the means of figuring out what Chucky has in store for them, and it amounts to almost nothing. For context, once the kids arrive at the boarding school, a Chucky doll shortly arrives thereafter. But instead of killing them, he's going and taking pictures and relaying information for someone who we only know as the Colonel, which, spoilers, is just another Chucky. We spend a decent amount of time just dicking around with the kids while nothing really meaningful happens. There's almost no legitimate reason as to why we needed to drag a lot of this shit out, when we could be spending a lot more time doing literally anything else. A lot of this season just falls flat story-wise. The entire last season we built up to Chucky making an army of himself, only for the first 10 minutes of this season to just completely do away with that immediately. That frustrates me so much to this day, because there's a lot you can do with having multiple Chuckies, I feel, and the direction this season's story takes is just not that good. Something I praised last season for was its well-balanced tone. They didn't shy away from the goofier elements of the franchise, but also mainly stuck to serious storytelling. This season almost completely throws that shit out the window. The tone this time around leans heavily into the goofy and wacky shit, mainly indicative of the Seed of Chucky style, and I really don't think that was the right call to make. I admire and respect Mancini for not straying away from Seed of Chucky, when most other franchises, if they had as big of a mess as that movie was, they would surely act like it never existed. So I respect Mancini for not disassociating the franchise from that film, but this really was not the best step to take for this season in my opinion. A lot of the zany and wacky shit that happens is just not that entertaining in my eyes. I myself only like Seed of Chucky in an ironic sense, so some aspects of them returning to this style of writing I didn't entirely hate, but it results in a lot of weird tonal inconsistencies that leaves me not being able to get fully invested into the plot. This is just a style and tone that I think Chucky really shouldn't have gone back to. The next season tones it down just a bit, but there still are a few cracks that creep in regards to some of the goofy shit not landing that well, but I'll discuss that when we get to that season. Something that also kind of bothers me is this season's obsession with, just choosing not to explain shit. It's from small stuff like Tiffany exclaiming that she can only transfer her soul into a Belle doll. Why exactly is that the case? Or when Jake and Devin recall a movie called Bride of Chucky. Wait, the fuck? Yeah, at the beginning of the season when our trio regroup, Jake and Devin recall knowing about a movie called Bride of Chucky. Let's just pretend that they found out about it after the events of Season 1. The fact that the writers just put that in there without any attempt at explaining how that works really irritates me. The best explanation that I can come up with is between Seed of Chucky and now, Tiffany as Jennifer Tilly starred in a movie called Bride of Chucky, even though in Seed they were filming a movie called Chucky Goes Psycho. So if they wanted a movie for the characters to reference, why didn't they just name drop that? Hell, they show a Chucky Goes Psycho poster in Jennifer Tilly's house, so I don't know why they refrained from referencing it. That as well is another thing I'm mixed on. Alongside the comedy of Seed making a return, the meta stuff returns as well, and I'd say it was alright. Chucky being like a talk show host was not something I really needed. and if I'm being honest, it's just something I'm not fond of at all. But the whole episode playing out as a classical murder mystery deal was kind of neat. There is a lot of pop culture stuff that gets called out, not just in that episode, but the whole season, and it worked to varying degrees of success. The writing and general approach to this season just felt so unnecessary. The characters were all a bit of a mixed bag. I feel the need to get this out of the way first and foremost. The way this show severely underutilizes the legacy characters continues to frustrate me. In the first season, while I had slight issues with seeing folks like Andy and Kyle sparingly, I at least had the hope that we'd do more with them in the following season. With the season ending presumably with Andy and Kyle's stories being over, and with them not appearing at all in season 3, or at least, canonically, I guess, it just disappoints me with how little they did for 2 whole seasons. I didn't need them to be main characters. I'm fine with the Hackensack kids, but come on, we could have done way more with these guys. Kyle is alive, not that much of a shocker there, but other than punching Nika a shit ton of times, she didn't really do that much. Still love to have her here though. The same kind of goes for Andy, with him being captured and tortured by Chucky for the past year. The only really interesting thing we get from him, other than a surprisingly improved performance by Alex Vincent, seriously, I know I talked shit about his performance in the last season, but it really worked for me this time around. Anyway, the only really intriguing thing we get with Andy is him being at conflict over who he is once he gets rid of Chucky. This is some interesting shit that this season should have spent more time on, but between 2 whole seasons we barely get any genuine time with Andy, so this little bit just feels like nothing but wasted potential. The direction we took with Nika this season, I honestly really enjoyed. In this season, even though there's not a lot for Fiona Dorff to do physically, I still think she did a great job. It was honestly a neat twist to have Nika and Chucky conspiring together to get in their own respective bodies. Slight nitpick, but in this scene, I personally would have preferred to have Fiona Dorff play the actual Charles Lee Ray, like she did in the last season, for this scene. Because watching Chucky's goofy ass here, I don't know, it just kind of takes me out of it. But that goes into a problem that I'll talk about in just a bit. I remember seeing a few folks taking issue with the darker turn that Nika took at the end of the season, but if I'm being honest, given everything this woman has gone through, I think she deserves some revenge. A big part of this season that I was looking forward to was the return of Glenn and Glenda, and they, along with Nika, were some of my favorite parts of this season if I'm being honest. Mainly Glenda, because unfortunately we don't get that much of Glenn throughout this season. A majority of focus goes to Glenda, which I don't hate. Glenda was a character that we really didn't get to know that much in comparison to Glenn and Seed of Chucky, so I kind of like the amount we get of them in this season. Their story is interesting because from being split and put into the 2 kids in Seed of Chucky, we have them being at conflict with who they are individually, but also having to come to grips with finding out they have some pretty shit parents. Glenda being at odds with her killer nature I thought was really compelling, as well as the way they go into Glenn and Glenda's relationship as a whole. I like how with them being 2 souls split apart, they make several comments on them both never feeling quite whole, like they're incomplete, as well as going into how inseparable and connected the 2 are. I just think it was really neat. It still kind of disappoints me that Glenn almost did next to nothing for the whole season before going back into their doll form though. Glenda got a lot of focus and actually had a lot of interactions with Chucky, and while I like the dives into the relationship with them, I think it was a huge missed opportunity to not have Glenn properly meet Chucky this season. Given how fucked their relationship was in Seed, it would have been interesting to do something with them this season. Anyway, I really enjoyed Glenn and Glenda, and the way their story ends this season with them becoming one, even bringing back Billy Boyd to do the voice, was really cute. Now, let's talk about Tiffany. In the first season, people expressed a lot of contention with how she was portrayed as more of a joke character, but I personally didn't see her that way. I thought it was a more decent balance between her goofy and somewhat serious portrayals. It was never really a big problem for me. This season, on the other hand, tell me why they turned Tiffany from a character I loved to probably my least favorite character in the whole season. I'm not kidding. The writing approach to Tiffany this season for some reason turned her into this unnecessarily over-the-top incompetent ditz. I'll go more into the larger cast in just a bit, but I don't know what it was about the way they directed Jennifer Tilly in this season that made me find her so fucking insufferable. The only time last season I remember her being overtly campy was in the last 2 episodes. In this season, almost from the get-go, the dial is turned all the way up and it just does not work for me. That scene where she gets all nervous and stuttery in front of the detective is one example of this character just being turned into an unnecessary and unfunny joke. Tiffany has been killing motherfuckers for ages, and you seriously mean to tell me she's never been questioned by the police? Tiffany used to have this huge air of confidence. Even in a scenario where she was in a pinch, she had a charm to her that at least made it seem like she could work through it easy enough. Her being portrayed as this nervous and stuttery and clumsy character just does not work for me. And you want to know what's really fucked up? Tiffany was faced with death numerous times throughout this season, and literally every single time she is, I was just hoping she would end up dying. When Chucky surprises her in the middle of the party, I was hoping he'd shoot her. When Tiffany confronts Nika at the end of the season, I was praying she'd pull the trigger. The last shot in the season finale where Chucky is presumably about to kill her, even though we know that's obviously not the case, I was hoping that'd be the end for her. Which sucks, because I love Tiffany and I love Jennifer Tilly, but the approach to this character has just gotten so tiresome that I just wanted to be done with her. Now for our hack and sack trio. They were all just okay. Jake and Devin really don't have that much going on. Throughout the season, they mainly just bicker and argue about Chucky. Nothing really intriguing about their relationship together gets any major focus or development. That kiss at the beginning of the season was really cute, though. Between the three, Devin has the least amount to do, which kinda sucks because I think the actor significantly improved from the last season, but unfortunately didn't manage to do that much. Jake's story, however, was somewhat interesting. With the three being sent to a Christian boarding school and the death of his foster brother in the beginning of the season, Jake actually takes a lot of the teachings to heart and works on a path of forgiving himself. And that coincides with a plot point that I'll talk about in just a bit, but as a whole, I thoroughly enjoyed Jake's story this season. But between the three, Lexi is most definitely the one to have the most interesting story. Post-season 1, she's developed into becoming a drug addict, and while storylines like this can be a bit hit or miss for me, I think it was handled pretty well. Out of our trio from the previous season, she's undoubtedly the one with the most interesting amount of development. Which for me is saying something, considering how much I hated her in that first season. With her almost being the third wheel to Jake and Devin, her feeling alone and devolving into these habits I thought was really interesting. Especially when she grows a good friendship with the season's newcomer, Nadine. I absolutely adore this character. The overly positive, cheery, and lighthearted character has the makings of being extremely annoying, but that's thankfully not the case for her, as I just couldn't get enough of Nadine. She's just an infectious little ball of joy, and I can't help but have the dumbest smile on my face whenever she's on screen. Anyway, the bond she and Lexi grew over the course of the season was really good. Obviously, Lexi is dismissive of her, but the more Nadine pries and gets to know her and help her with her issues, they form a meaningful friendship, and it's pretty cute. All the returning characters from last season, as well as Nadine, were overall pretty good, I'd say. Now for the main of the hour, Chucky. I am not gonna lie, I could not stand Chucky this season. There are a lot of factors that go into what makes me not really like Chucky this much in comparison to last season. First of which is the design. I don't entirely know what it is, but I just do not like the design for Chucky in this season. All things considered, it's not too different from what we come to expect, but it's just something about the face that I can't really take seriously. In the first season, Chucky looked perfect, not much else I can really say. In this season, he just looks really goofy. Like, maybe they couldn't make a perfect replica of the look from the last season, but he just looks really off. It might just be a me thing, honestly. But it's not just the look. The way they present Chucky is also an issue as well. The way these scenes are lit and showcased really don't do a good job at portraying Chucky as a legitimate threat to our characters. The way he's written goes along with that as well. Now I think is the right time to mention that we're not dealing with just one Chucky this season. Yeah, the truck exploding in the first episode didn't wipe out every Chucky, as we have three main ones to deal with this season. And I can't stand them. We have what I'll call Scout Chucky, the one that was stalking and taking pictures of our hack and sack trio, who eventually turns into Good Chucky, through the group brainwashing him for information. Buff Chucky, yeah, I'll get to him in a bit. And Colonel Chucky. Yeah, I think I just about hate all three of these guys. Okay, hate might be a bit of a strong word, because it is Chucky at the end of the day, and he's still very entertaining, but all these different Chuckies all feel very one-note and gimmicky. And again, it's something that does a disservice to making Chucky seem like an actual legitimate threat. First of all, Good Chucky. I hate him. Yes, he was entertaining and unironically adorable as shit at times. It's nice to see Brad Dourif pull off multiple styles of performances with these different Chuckies, and that especially goes for Good Chucky. Now, with Good Chucky, like I said, they play up the cuteness with him, and while it is adorable and entertaining, it makes Chucky feel more like a joke. But Darion, this Chucky isn't supposed to be scary. I know, and I wouldn't care as much if the other Chuckies managed to pull through, but neither of them do. Good Chucky also plays a huge role in Jake's development. From the beginning of the season, who I'll call Kamikaze Chucky, ended up killing Jake's foster brother, Gary, by, and I'll go ahead and say what we were all thinking. We were kind of grateful for it.
Holy secret identity. Holy Halloween costumes, Batman. Holy homemade bomb bag.
Yeah, like Chuck said, that shit was getting really old really damn fast. And Jake, being guilt-ridden, really takes in a lot of the church's teachings, including the act of forgiveness, with him aiming to forgive and redeem Chucky so that he can in turn forgive himself for what happened to Gary. And it's interesting to say the least. I'll say that while this little storyline was kind of bland, all things considered, it at least made the conflict amongst our characters make at least some sense. Not complete sense, but some sense. It was cute seeing Chucky and Jake grow a bond. They had the little dude baptized and everything. But overall, it was just kinda meh. Now, everything I've stated thus far doesn't have that much grounds to get me to hate a character. But the reason I hate this little shit is because he took something away from me personally, goddammit. This little fuck is the one that killed Nadine! Nadine, the sweetest, most innocent, and likable character in this whole show. Nay, this whole franchise, and this little shit killed her! For what? On a serious note, though, something that just slightly annoys me with this variation of Chucky is after he kills Nadine, he flip-flops back and forth between being good and evil. One would infer that Chucky is just trying to save face and is fucking with everyone. But according to Don Mancini, Chucky is literally switching back and forth between being good and evil. Now, the reason this annoys me is because this detail is irrelevant because it goes absolutely nowhere. They exercise his soul within the same episode. Now, when it comes to stuff that creators of TV shows or movies have to explain, I tend not to pay too much attention to it if it's not properly explained or expressed within the actual material. This detail is so irrelevant because it goes absolutely nowhere and changes literally nothing about the plot. Anyway, good Chucky was fine. He was cute, although it made Chucky not scary in the slightest. As a character on his own, he was just But because he killed Nadine, I hate his little fucking guts. He should have got a far worse death than what he actually got. Fuck him. Buff Chucky is boring as shit. Has one of the coolest introductions of any character in the franchise, but he's so one-note and boring that I don't find him entertaining, nor am I invested in him enough to take him that seriously as a threat. They just put a fucking voice modulating effect over Brad Dourif's voice, and it's so distracting that I can't even take it seriously. And before they do anything legitimately interesting with him, he fucking dies. The third Chucky we get is none other than Colonel Chucky.
Look, I'm just going to keep it a buck with you guys. This Chucky and what they did with him did absolutely nothing for me. The main reason for that being is because I haven't watched the movie Apocalypse Now. Call me an uncultured swine if you want to, but all this Chucky is just Marlon Brando's character from that movie. This whole shtick just doesn't work for me because I haven't watched that movie, and I think that's enough of a sign as to why this variation of Chucky is a bit of a problem.
The little references they pull just do nothing for me, and just feel super weird and out of place. On top of all these Chucky variations feeling gimmicky as hell, I also hate the escalation of making Chucky this TV show host big celebrity personality. Granted, it is for one episode, and I did find it entertaining, but all this is just painfully unnecessary. I just really did not like the approach they took with this character in this season. What makes it even worse is this season severely wasted the multiple doll premise. Since being introduced in Cult, I was excited to see where we could go with this premise, and this season just failed miserably with it. I would have preferred at least a few surviving Chuckies from that truck, each going and doing their own thing that leaves for more opportunities and stories. But no, we were left with these three very gimmicky and very lame versions instead. I'd want to be hopeful and say that if they take another crack at it, it'd be cool, but another part of me hopes they don't because it'd feel a little redundant. Since they messed it up already, I wouldn't want to run the rest of it happening again. I would prefer to just stick with one Chucky for a while. Another thing that bothers me about the multiple doll thing this time around is whenever one of these little shits dies, it never really feels satisfying. It just feels like another body being added to the kill count, which I think shouldn't be the case for the antagonist of your story. Sorry to keep harping on this bit, but a small nitpick I have about the multiple Chucky thing is I kind of don't like how they write every Chucky almost the same. Like, it's more than likely just a me thing, but it's very small moments where they write these different Chuckies like they have the exact same experiences. The biggest moment that made me realize this is when they removed the Chucky that was inside of Nika's body and put it into another doll. The doll talks to Jake as if he knows him, and even Lexi in the finale. This Chucky has never interacted with these kids, and we know that's not the case because he's been stuck with Nika for 2 seasons. And before anyone says something about a hive mind, maybe I'm dumb, but there's been almost zero evidence of a hive mind for the multiple Chuckies. In fact, I think there's more evidence against there being a hive mind than there is for it. I know this is very nitpicky, but I would have preferred to give these different Chuckies a slightly different dynamic with these characters. But again, that is very much a me thing. Anyway, to not end things off on too negative of a note, as I've said numerous times, the cast did pretty well with the material they were given. It was nice to see Devon Sawa return to play Father Bryce, a character that I didn't think I'd enjoy as much as I did. But you can also add him to the list of things being wasted in this season. That death scene, while nonsensical, was still pretty fun. Like I also mentioned before, I greatly prefer Alex Vince's performance as Andy in this season compared to the last. That dry, monotone style that he says he's going for Works way better for an Andy who's been tortured for a year. Olivia Allen-Lynn proves herself to be the best performer out of our hack and sack trio once again. They all do a great job, and the guy who plays Devin greatly improved from the last season. Again, it's just a shame that he didn't get to do that much as a character. But still, the best performer out of everyone has to be Fiona Dourif. Even wheelchair-bound for most of the season, she still does a great job as Nika, and especially Chucky. The practical effects were also pretty damn good. Some of the time, at least. There were a few moments when liberties were taken with stuff like CGI, and they did look a little wonky, but all in all, the VFX, especially with all the gory kills, makes for some of the best in the franchise. That and the soundtrack I dug as well. I didn't talk too extensively on the OST for Season 1, but I thought it was great. The same goes for this season. The needle drops were all well-timed and fit the scenes decently well, and yeah, that's about all I got. Overall, Season 2 of Chucky was a fucking mess. The cast all did a pretty decent job. The effects, while hit or miss a few times, still managed to pull through. The amount of blood and gore we got was pretty good too. That, as well as the soundtrack being pretty decent. But dear God, the dip in quality in terms of the writing for this season cannot be understated. The writing of this season was so painfully all over the place. Going back to the meta, self-referential, Seed of Chucky style of writing was one of this season's biggest detriments. The wacky shit, while entertaining on a surface level, overall just feel unnecessary or out of place. The directions of certain characters like the various Chuckies, and especially Tiffany, did nothing more than just piss me off. And the usage of legacy characters like Andy and Kyle pissed me off even more. The comedy, or I guess I should say the attempt at it, was very hit or miss, and in general, I don't know what else to say besides this season was just really disappointing. I can't bring myself to say I outright hated it, because truthfully, I didn't. But the writing choices for our characters, the tone, and the non-existent plot just leaves this season feeling like a giant mess.
Now we shall temporarily close this Chucky saga with Season 3, and just hope it's at least somewhat of an improvement from Season 2.
2 hours later.
Okay, that wasn't bad. Not perfect, but not bad.
Chucky Season 3 released in October of 2023. Well, its first half, at least, and the latter half released in early 2024. The season centers around our hack and sack trio on the hunt for Chucky so they can find Lexi's little sister, Caroline, while Chucky finds himself in the White House, having some deathly effects from Season 2's exorcism on his soul, aims to find the means to get back in the good graces of Damballa before his time runs out. Yeah, I might as well get to talking about this now because I'm gonna have my hands pretty full in October. Here we are in the third season of Chucky. This show has had a pretty complicated run for me. Obviously, if you've seen my previous videos, you know that while it had its issues, I was quite fond of the first season. It had a decent blend of the campy elements of stuff like Bride and Seed, while maintaining a somewhat serious tone like the first couple films. Season 2 of the show tanked it hard for me, as it leaned way too much into the campier aspects of the franchise, whilst also generally feeling pretty aimless for a huge duration of the season. And now we have Season 3, a season which started off promisingly with introducing fresh and new ideas that shake up the story in an intriguing way, but then later on falls back into a few of the same problems that plagued the seasons prior. I'll go more in depth with this later, but everything in regards to our main trio just fell incredibly flat. They had no real interesting presence as characters, and honestly, if this season completely moved away from them, nothing much of value would be lost in my opinion. The season spends long chunks with them dragging their feet to accomplish a task that I personally couldn't find myself getting invested in. Everything else managed to be quite interesting though. I like how this season goes all in with the spiritual, ghosty aspect of this franchise. I know the show has been getting a lot of pushback for leaning into this stuff from diehard Chucky fans, claiming that this stuff is out of place for the franchise. When, I don't know, the series literally revolves around a dead man's soul possessing an inanimate object and going around killing people. Doing stuff like the spirit realm and stuff like that, to me, fits right at home in this series. I really think they did the most of what they could with it, and I'm thoroughly satisfied with what they pulled off in this regard. I also like how this season, and this may just be me reaching here, in a way harkens back to the Bride and Seed of Chucky days, where we put a bit more focus on Chucky as a character. As in, he has a specific goal in mind, and for a period we kind of follow him and his goal to have Damballa accept him back. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I thought it was a little interesting to go back to that type of story for the series. Not to mention, this season builds upon stuff introduced in the previous one in a pretty interesting way. Namely, the exorcism on Chucky being the cause of his newest predicament. That was something I really wasn't expecting to come back around, and I like how cleverly it ties into this season's narrative. There are other instances where they try to tie in previous story beats of the last season that don't really work as well, and I'll get to that when I get to it. But for the most part, I think they did a decent job at tying things together, which is way more than I could say for the second season. This season, when it comes to structure and pacing, surpasses the last season by a wide margin. With a much smaller cast than before, the season feels somewhat more streamlined, and overall just more focused as it doesn't really drag its feet like with Season 2. It's not perfect, however, because generally speaking, things do tend to get rushed, especially when we get closer to the end, but as a whole, the season paced itself fairly well. I especially love how they went about structuring and pacing the reveal of Chucky's big plan compared to the previous seasons. In the previous seasons, they went out of their way to have Chucky's plan be a mystery up until the last 1 or 2 episodes. Whereas here, they let you know early on that he's counting down to something, and they finally reveal it almost within 2 episodes. I just like how the season doesn't like to waste its time meandering with its plot or characters. The tone for this season is interesting, because you can tell it strives to give more of a balance of the serious and campy tones of the last 2 seasons, but I feel like it just ended up falling flat on itself. Like, the wacky campiness is noticeably subdued compared to the previous season, but it's still very evident that a lot of that vibe and energy is still retained for better or for worse. I think, to me, it just results in the whole vibe of the season being a bit confused as to what it really wants to go for with its tone. Stuff like the whole voodoo hospital thing was just... why? I already commend this season for leaning into the spiritual side of the series. That's something that I've wanted to see more of for ages, but then they pull some goofy shit like this, which does nothing but just frustrate me. To go about this in a pretty lame and uninventive way. And it's just stuff like that, or the reporter who got cut in half taking a picture before dying, which dips its toes a bit too much into the campier elements for my liking. And everything in regards to Tiffany was once again turned all the way up, but I'll go more into that when discussing the characters. And I guess I'll go into this now. The show still retains a bit of its meta humor and jabs, but it's significantly more subdued than last season. From Tiffany meeting what I assume is a Martha Stewart-like figure in prison, Chucky flipping through other horror doll movies, even getting in some admittedly funny jabs at Megan.
Ah, little bitch, she stole my moves. Fuck you, gun.
This stuff doesn't plague the season like the last one, but I did feel the need to point it out. It's not terrible, but it did just leave me feeling kinda... meh. Something that also bothers me with this season, or this show rather, is that they still fully commit to removing or killing certain characters or elements of the show before we can really do anything interesting with it. For context, after the events of Season 2, the Hackensack kids were put under the care of Mrs. Fairchild, and right as we were getting little glimpses of potential intriguing dynamics and stories, they decide to fucking kill her off. The same goes for the reporter I mentioned earlier. After a death in the White House was discovered, she is shown to be rather skeptical of the explanation that was provided. And we get little scenes of her getting snippets of information, only for it to amount to nothing as she gets killed off before anything interesting can be done with it. Seriously, Mancini, why is this just something you love to do? Is it funny to you? Because all it does is piss me off. Anyway, the characters. The character writing in this season, for the most part at least, received a pretty noticeable increase in quality in my opinion. Now, I'll be honest and say that goes for almost every character who isn't our main trio, but my point still stands. As I said, these 3 take a significant backseat when it comes to the overarching plot, Jake and Devin especially. It's really a shame because from Season 1 and even Season 2, I'd say that Jake was a pretty good protagonist. I know many weren't fond of his arc in Season 2, but I think it worked decently enough. But when it comes to this season, other than the final 2 episodes, he has literally nothing going for him. The entire duration of the season when it came to Jake, and even Devin, was the 2 wanting to have sex. That's it. There's no arc for either of them to go on or anything. Nope, they just want to fuck, and that's kind of freaking lame. Devin having nothing worthwhile to do is kind of par for the course in this show, but it really disappointed me with just how little Jake did throughout. That said, they did manage to do some interesting stuff in the last 2 episodes. Seeing him venture into the spirit realm and confront his father was something I wasn't expecting, and I think they executed it pretty well. I know him forgiving his dad may come out of left field for some, but I think it in a clever way circles back around to what he learned from the boarding school in Season 2, about forgiving others if you want to forgive yourself for your past sins. It may not be much, and I may just be reaching, but I like how that kind of worked its way back around in the end. That said, something I didn't like making its way back around into this season was the Good Chucky storyline. Now, I didn't hate this storyline in Season 2, but I did hate how very little was done with what Mancini revealed about the Good Chucky. That he was routinely switching between being good and evil, almost like a Jekyll and Hyde sort of deal. Them bringing this back once again resulted in almost nothing really interesting happening. Jake's role throughout the season was just incredibly underwhelming. The same goes for Devin, which, like I said, for this show is pretty par for the course. It's honestly embarrassing just how little Devin does throughout this show, if I'm being honest. Even Lexi's role in this season isn't that interesting. She was one of the breakout characters going from Season 1 to 2, and seeing her here having nothing going for her was pretty disheartening. Her strive to search for her sister Caroline wasn't that interesting, as I'll just say it right now, I don't give two shits about Caroline as a character. It doesn't help with the fact that we know that she isn't dead or nothing bad happened to her, as pretty early on we see she's very adamant in assisting Chucky. So nothing about this whole hunt for Caroline thing really kept me invested all that much. Another thing she has going on is a relationship with the US president's eldest son, Grant. I'll go further into him later, but I really couldn't get into this relationship. They really didn't have that believable chemistry, especially seeing as a good portion of their interactions revolves around her using him to get into the White House so the trio can find Chucky. So yeah, she really didn't have anything going for her that kept me invested either. Tiffany's role in this season is significantly lessened than before. Since she was framed for the death of Lexi's mom in Season 2, she finds herself locked up and put on death row. She spends a majority of the season behind bars, trying to find a way to escape her fate. And everything revolving around Tiffany is just kind of the same stuff I complained about in Season 2, where the campy nature of the character is just dialed all the way up, and I can never really get into it. Tiffany doesn't really do much or have that major of a presence in the season up until the end. This character, in my opinion, has gone on way farther than she needed to. At least in this style. With the season ending with her back in doll form, I'm curious to see what else can be done with her. But otherwise, yeah, she was just kinda okay. I guess I'll get into this now. Legacy characters like Andy, Kyle, and Nika take an even bigger backseat than before. Andy and Kyle are just straight up not a part of this season at all, other than that fake-out death with Andy, which was incredible, by the way. But if I'm being honest, I'm kind of glad these guys took a backseat, partly because it gave more room to a lot of the other stuff they wanted to tackle, but also they really wouldn't add much other than just cluttering stuff up. While the way the show used them previously was a bit meh, Season 2 provided a decent bit of closure to Andy and Kyle, at least as far as the series goes anyway. Nika's role this season was incredibly minor, but I still enjoyed her for the time she was on screen, even if she didn't do much. Now, I absolutely love all the stuff they did with Chucky this season. I love how we're back to the good old days where Chucky is on the clock and he needs to find a way to escape a particular fate or he's doomed forever. I like the development he had in Seed where he just prefers to stick with the doll body and fuck shit up. But I also love how the writers managed to play off of the style of the first 3 movies, where we see Chucky get angry and frantic about his current predicament.
Joseph, what's wrong? Are you sick again?
I'm fucking dying!
It's just a neat way of bringing things back to basics. Seeing Chucky come to grips with what would potentially be a permanent death was pretty fun. Everything revolving around the whole Chucky and Damballa story, I just absolutely love and adore. Damballa has been an element of the franchise that has yet to be properly utilized, and this season going out of its way to have Chucky abandoned by Damballa after Season 2's exorcism was a brilliant idea. And going further with that, seeing the unique ways they utilize the spiritual side of this series and having Chucky kill as a spirit was genuinely amazing. One of the major highlights of the whole series, if you ask me. Characterization-wise, Chucky, as always, is pretty good. They toned down the over-the-top campiness of his persona from Season 2, which I'm incredibly grateful for. Chucky, like always, was a blast this season. No played-out gimmicky BS like in Season 2, just good old Chucky fun. I guess I'll bring this up now, but the gimmick of having Chucky in the White House, I think was handled fairly well. With this type of setting in this kind of franchise, I think there was a cause for concern when it comes to absurd political humor and satire, but nah. They played things relatively straight for the most part. It wouldn't have bothered me personally, but I could just imagine all the dumb uproar stuff like that would have caused. Not to mention, the reasoning behind how and why Chucky's here was pretty inventive, I'd say. A tad forced, yeah, as Chucky needed to find an evil enough place to try and give Damballa sacrifices if he wanted to get in his good graces again. And he chose the White House, because why the hell not? Anyway, Caroline, like I said, I didn't really care for. Her role was pretty minuscule, only being in about 2 episodes. But if there's a positive I do have, it's that it's cool to actually see Chucky have a killer apprentice. Let's just hope they don't do away with her too quickly and actually properly utilize her for the future. In regards to our characters, something I wasn't expecting to be as interesting as it was the presidential family. This is what I was mainly referring to when saying that the character writing got a decent increase in quality, because everything surrounding these guys kept me fairly invested throughout the season. The family reeling from the death of their youngest son and how each member deals with it was genuinely interesting. I'm surprised they managed to make each member extremely compelling in their own way. The boy Henry getting attached to Chucky through believing it's his dead brother was honestly pretty sad and endearing. The president as well I found to be pretty compelling too. You can see he's genuinely a well-meaning guy who just wants the best for his family and country. And all of this with seeing the ghost of his son, just starting to see it all unraveling, was, like I said, pretty compelling. Even though he didn't do that much, it was honestly sad to see his character go, given all the stuff he'd been through. Usually when they kill off a character before any more can be done with them, it irritates me, but I think they managed to work around it well enough. The First Lady and everything revolving around her and CIA agent Price, who I'll get into in just a bit, cleaning up Chucky's messes was pretty intriguing. Her drive to protect what little of her family she has left is commendable and really easy to sympathize with. Grant is the one I'm a bit iffy on, because he has this kind of corny, cool dude front he puts on, but secretly has more going on with him kind of thing. He's a well-meaning and good kid, but anytime he says or does something endearing, he says or does some corny and cringy shit that kind of takes me out of it. That's kind of the main problem I have with the thing between him and Lexi. Not only because a majority of the time it doesn't really feel like they like each other, like at all. Like I mentioned previously, Lexi more often than not, it seems like she's just trying to find ways to get close to Chucky. But with Grant, it's not all that better because it kind of just feels like he likes her because she's hot, I guess. I know they have their little moments bonding over dead relatives and stuff, but none of it really flowed or felt all that natural. Price is, I guess, what you would consider a secondary antagonist to Chucky, but also kinda not. Throughout the season, he was very morally ambiguous, aiming to do whatever it takes to defend this country and all that. For the duration of the season, I liked this shady character. He had a chill and low-key demeanor to where it felt like, for the most part, he was relatively on top of things and was pretty cool. Until the last episode where he just goes full-on evil for no real reason. Like, seriously, bombing the White House is one thing, but the scene where he stays behind and tries to take everyone else out just felt a little out of left field. That's not to say it was out of character for him to do so, but I don't know, that escalation of his character just didn't feel all that natural to me. Yeah, overall, the character writing was pretty good this time around. The same can also be said for the performances. Everyone did a pretty good job performance-wise. As for our trio, I think I've said about as much as I can about them in my previous videos. Olivia is undoubtedly the best, with Zachary doing a pretty good job as well. I'll say, by the end, he really started to flex his acting chops, because Chucky at one point possesses Jake's body, and Arthur does an incredible impression of the voice.
You know, Timmy, you're gonna be real popular on the other side. I made a few friends in there. Told them to keep an eye out for you. So just be sure to tell them Chucky sent you.
Devin's actor Bjornvin once again did a decent job, but the writers never really give him anything interesting to do. Jennifer Tilly, as always, does a good job, but the over-the-top direction they keep taking with Tiffany is just never really up my alley. Fiona Dourif, as always, does an exceptional job as Nika, and even the younger Charles Lee Ray. Nice to see her making a return to this Chucky, at least. And her playing off of her father, Brad Dourif, was really damn cool. Speaking of which, Brad fucking Dourif. Not only did Brad, as always, do a great job voicing Chucky, it was such a treat to see him physically play Charles Lee Ray after so long. Like, he was fucking incredible. He fits as good in the role physically as he does doing the voice. It was just amazing to have him in this, I'm sorry. Devon Sawa, of course, returns to play not only the President of the United States, but also the President's double, Randall.
As always, Devon Sawa absolutely kills it in both of these roles. I love how much he disappears into these roles where they feel vastly different from each other. We have a few returning faces from the previous seasons, like Laura Jean, who played Sister Ruth in Season 2, returning as the First Lady, who did an exceptional job. I'm glad Mancini chose to have her return because she was just incredible. As well as Michael Theriot, who played the pervy psychiatrist in Cult of Chucky, as well as Lexi's dad in Season 1. He did a decent job as well. Alex Vincent, for his one episode appearance, did a pretty good job too. The kid that plays Henry did a great job. Definitely gotta say, he's probably tied with Alex Vincent when it comes to adorable kids in this franchise. The guy that played Grant also did a pretty decent job. I guess since she's a relatively important character now, I'll comment on her. Karina Batrick does a pretty decent job as Caroline as well. I didn't comment on her in the previous seasons because she was a pretty nothing character and her performance wasn't that noteworthy. But since then, she's seen some great improvement, I'd say. Caroline as a character I may not be that interested in, but her performance this season still somewhat stood out. She gives Caroline the right amount of sass that pairs off with Chucky surprisingly well. Like I said, the cast overall did a pretty good job. Something else I adore about this season is that it was bloody, bloody, bloody. The practical and gore effects in this season, I don't know what changed, but they looked fucking amazing. Now that's not to say they looked bad in the previous seasons, but the effects here received a noticeable uptick in quality. All the kills this season trumps the stuff from the previous ones by a wide margin, just based on how fucking gnarly they are. From Chucky ripping out the president's eyes, to that lady boiling her face off, the chandelier falling at the White House, Chucky slitting that lady's neck to where it snaps back like a Pez dispenser, the fucking umbrella kill. I think I made my point clear. The gore is top fucking notch. Everything else effects-wise can be very hit or miss. The effects on the doll are as always pretty good. I'm still not too fond of the design philosophy they took on in Season 2, carrying over into this season. But regardless, it looks fine enough. What's crazy is that in some scenes they change up the effects on the doll to have it look a bit more meaner during a few of the kill scenes, and if I'm being honest, I would have preferred this be his default look for this season compared to what we usually get. It kind of reminds me of his look in Child's Play 3. I miss when Chucky looked like an angry-ass, mean-ass little demon. But it's whatever, I guess. This season carries on the tradition of giving fresh and unique takes on the Chucky look. The old and withered Chucky is truly one of the best looks given to the character. The level of gross detail as it looks so decayed is really damn cool. Everything else is a bit iffy, because in the later half of the season they do tend to use a bit of green screen, and it looks like dog shit. I can give a bit of leeway to them because they were likely rushing due to trying to beat the actor and writer strike at the time, but it doesn't change the fact that a lot of this looks like ass. Overall, Season 3 of Chucky turned out to be just okay. That may sound a tad shocking considering how positive I've been towards this season, and I'll get into why in just a sec, but overall, the season is structured and paced fairly well. It introduces new and exciting elements into the franchise that plays off of stuff we've known before in pretty interesting ways. Diving into the supernatural more with ghosts and spirit realms and whatnot was a genuine welcome for this series, and I love what they did with this stuff. The character writing was a bit more engaging this time around as well. There were no breakout characters that stood out like our poor Nadine, but overall the characters were done pretty well. The gore and kills were as bloody as ever, and the practical effects were top fucking notch. But everything revolving around our supposed main characters really left a lot to be desired. They took a major back seat and were just left with nothing really interesting to do. Jake and Devon were as boring as ever, and Lexi with her thing with Grant or her search for Caroline really left me with nothing to feel all that engaged with. Not to mention, the tone still carries on a bit of the goofy, campy energy, which, as I've expressed, just isn't my thing when it comes to Chucky. Yes, it's not as prominent as last season, but they do lean on it in a few instances a bit too much, where I think we would have benefited from actually establishing more cool shit relating to this franchise. I'm looking at you, Voodoo Hospital. But that doesn't really sound like it's grounds for me to call the season as a whole mediocre, does it? Well, as per usual with this series, the finale kind of muddies up how I view this season. I'll briefly go over the episode and why it leaves me feeling the way that I do. The finale has Jake venture into the spirit realm in an attempt to find the good version of Chucky in hopes to have him sacrifice his soul so they can be done with all this. Also to find out where Caroline is.
But it was all a trap to have Chucky possess Jake's body, which, like I said, was really cool. Chucky in Jake's body then takes Devin and Lexi to find Caroline, where it's revealed she's been staying with Wendell Wilkins, the creator of the Good Guy dolls, where Chucky re-enters his doll form, and they then tease a mysterious fate for our three heroes. Cut to Tiffany after making an intense escape from prison, making it to the Wilkins household. Still keeping it ambiguous as to what happened to the trio, we then have Tiff and Chucky reconcile, and Tiffany re-enters a doll body. They then ride off along with Caroline to who knows where. Nika then makes it to the Wilkins household shortly after, by somehow following a tracker of some kind. They never really explained what the fuck was going on there. Where she looks on in horror at the trio trapped in these nasty-ass, fuck-ugly-ass abomination marionette puppets. And the season ends with us not knowing the fate of Nika, and just having Chucky, Tiffany, and Caroline ride off into the sunset. Okay, this finale was something. Alright, everything in this finale I loved, except for the last 10 to 15 minutes. If they wanted to end things on a cliffhanger, I think ending it with Chucky in Jake's body would have been significantly more effective than what we actually got. Because I just would have loved to have seen more of Zachary Arthur's performance as Chucky. I really think the Tiffany character has overstayed her welcome, and given where the show has gone with her, I just can't bring myself to get excited about her doll shenanigans with Chucky. Speaking of which, I'm so fucking sick and tired of the back and forth bullshit with these two. If you're gonna have them together, keep them together. If you're gonna have them apart, keep them apart. This shit is just getting stale now. The next thing is honestly more of a nitpick than anything else, but the doll body Chucky finds himself in is said to be the prototype of the Good Guy doll. I low-key think this was a missed opportunity to give Chucky a more updated design. Since this is the prototype, it'd make sense why he wouldn't look the same as every other good guy. Maybe make his hair a darker red, give him some brighter overalls. Hell, maybe give his shirt some yellow stripes like in the remake. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but I just wish we got something unique. But then we of course have to talk about the fucking puppets. In the context of this being the creator of the Good Guy, this iconic looking doll, it's incredibly disappointing that when it comes to our main trio getting doll forms, they're relegated to these ugly ass puppets with really god awful CGI faces slapped onto them. Yeah, this was really not the best note to end this season on. This season wasn't terrible, but the finale and especially that ending just left me with an overwhelming feeling of mediocrity. As I said before with my positives, I loved a lot of what this season had to offer, but that rushed ending and odd conclusion just kind of muddied the whole thing for me. At the time of me making this, they have yet to confirm the season 4 that Mancini pitched, but he has come out and talked about making another Chucky movie. While the season was airing, I very much got the feeling that this had the makings of a final season, and I still think it could be. Whether they continue this story in a movie or leave the fate of our trio in a pretty grim place, I'm not sure which I'd prefer, honestly. This season was thoroughly enjoyable except for the final episode, which is why I found it to just be mediocre. It ain't bad by any means, it's of course better than season 2, but that ain't really that high of a bar to beat. The handling of our supposed main characters, the very meh tone, the whack as hell ending, all just put a sour taste in my mouth. Yeah, this season was just mediocre.
And with that, we close out the Chucky saga. For now, at least, until we get that new movie. Whenever that'll be. The Chucky show overall was a fun little adventure for our favorite little ginger fuck, that in my opinion could have had a good chance of pulling off a 4th season. It's a fun show and one that I'll definitely revisit on the off occasion, but it is still a bit of a fucking mess. So, with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. This has been Darion GNB, and take care.